There's a man in my house who's so big and strong. Goes to work each day and he stays all day long. He comes home each night looking tired and beat. Sits down at the dinner table, grabs a bite to eat. Never a frown, always a smile when he says to me, "How's my child?" Said, "I've been studying hard all day in school, trying my best to understand the golden rule. I got to color this man, Father.
Color him, Father.
I got to color him, love.
Color him, love.
Said I'm gonna color him, Father.
Color him, Father.
I got to color this man, love. Yes, I will.
Color him, love.
He said education is the key if you want to compete. He said without it, son, life just ain't very sweet. I love this man and I don't know why, except I know I'll need his strength till the day that I die. My mother loves him and I can tell by the way she looks at him when he holds my little sister Nell. I heard her say just the other day, if it had not been for him, she couldn't have found her way. I got to color this man, Father.
Color him, Father.
I got to color him, love.
Color him, love.
Said I want to color him, Father.
Color him, Father.
I got to color this man, love. Yes, I will.
Color him, love.
Oh, a real old man, he got killed in the war. Mama knew she and 7 children couldn't have gotten very far. My mother felt that she could never love again, until there he stood with that big wide grin. He married my mother and he took us in, and now we belong to the man with that big wide grin. I got to color this man, Father. Oh, color him, love. Said I'm gonna color him, Father. I think I'll color this man, love. He has been so good. I got to color this man, love. Yes, I will. Said I'm gonna color him, Father. I think I'll color this man, love. Listen, listen. Oh, faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Oh, faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Oh, faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Won't you pray with me? Eternal and everlasting God, we thank you for this wonderful Lord's Day, celebrating again the resurrection from the dead and the 3 words that have turned all of history. He is risen. And now, God, against the backdrop of this resurrection proclamation, we give our hearts and minds once again to your word. Let your word go forth, never to come back void, accomplish the purpose for which it is sent. Let it find us in all of our needful places, so that when we leave here, we're better than when we have come. In the name of Christ we pray, and God, we give you thanks. Let us all say together, amen. We're standing all over the house, and turn with me to the gospel as recorded by St. Luke in a seminal passage that we find in the 15th chapter, what is otherwise called the Lost and Found chapter. And we listen to the third of 3 parables, a trilogy that the Lord presents here from the 11th down through the 32nd verse, which is the balance of the chapter. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him nothing. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf, kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older brother was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music, dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, come home, you kill the fatted calf for him? My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Scripture as it is written. And may the Lord add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of his most holy word. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord and each other. I want to use as a subject on this Father's Day 2019, how a real father handles his business. How a real father handles his business. Gerhard von Rad says in his seminal commentary on the book of Genesis that there is a paradigm that begins in Genesis that runs replete throughout the scriptures of what he calls second son narratives, where the customs of men come into collision with the divine favor or parental preference, in which a younger child leapfrogs over an older child, where the customs of people suggest that prominence and entitlement is the birthright of the older. Sometimes in the will of God and the preference of parents, it falls on the younger and sets siblings at odds with one another. And thus we have a series of narratives that feature seething siblings competing for the favor and the material assets of the fathers. We see this in terms of the first two siblings, Cain and Abel, sons of Adam, the first man. When they bring their sacrifices to the Lord, for reasons undisclosed by the text, the younger brother Abel's sacrifices received more favorable than the older brother Cain. And in his anger to see the younger brother treated more favorably than himself, when he cannot strike up at God, he strikes out at his brother, and instead of being his brother's keeper, he becomes his brother's killer. And Adam does little about it. Then we see, in terms of the first family of God, Abraham, the father of the faithful, who believed God and it was counted unto him for righteousness, and he still flunked a fatherhood test. Didn't handle his business so well. When at first the womb of his wife Sarah was closed, and in the cultural options she chose an Egyptian handmaiden to be a surrogate mother for her, and to bear a child, and that child's name became Ishmael. All but in the providence of God, when Sarah's womb was opened later and bore Isaac, and then she did not want Isaac to come in second place in the estate and the inheritance and the prominence to the baby born by that Egyptian girl. She then went right back to that same spineless, capitulating Abraham and had that Egyptian girl flung out into the desert place for her and her child to die, rather than Abraham standing up for the girl who had no choice in the scheme that began and was conceived in the mind of Sarah to begin with. And to say, well, that boy, whatever the circumstance, he's still my child. He had them flung in the wilderness. The angel of God met them in the wilderness, said, God's got you even when people cast you off, like a thing to be played with rather than a person to be reckoned with. And then we see, even when Isaac, the child of the covenant of the next generation, becomes old, and he has two sons, Jacob and Esau, twin boys, born moments apart, with Jacob, the younger of the two, come out the womb already hustling, clutching his brother's heel, a precursor to a lifestyle of scheming and hoodwinking and bamboozling, where he would meet his brother Esau, who was a hunter, a macho man, a man of his hands and strength, but come home from a hunting trip that landed not much of anything, so hungry, and he met him at his point of vulnerability with a big bowl of gumbo, and asked him with the bubbling, gurgling stomach, he'd give him the gumbo if he traded for him his birthright. Brothers never make a critical life decision on an empty stomach. Traded away his birthright under the manipulations of a shrewd brother. Couldn't win any arm wrestling matching, but don't undersell him in terms of his wits. And then even when Isaac was on his deathbed and cataracts had taken his eyes and the light of day was dim to him, his wife Rebecca got together with Jacob, and mama and son conceived and connived together, colluded together to try and not only secure his brother Esau's birthright, but also the blessing to be the head of the family clan, put hair on Jacob's arm so that he thought he was the hairy hunter Esau, fooled him, pulled the wool over his eyes, and so he ended up, Jacob got the birthright and the blessing. Everything he had, he got through collusion. Somebody say collusion is real. And Isaac was too blind to see what was going on. He didn't handle his business so well. And then Jacob, when he became the great patriarch of the family, had 12 kids by 4 different women, not 4 different women, 3 baby mamas and a wife, 12 kids altogether. And the only 2 he showed much attention and concern for was the youngest 2. That was Benjamin and Joseph, because they were the children of Rachel, the one woman that he loved. Men can be with many women, but he ain't got room in his heart but for one. Brother, say amen under your breath. And when Rachel died giving birth to the youngest of the 12 boys, Benjamin, all Jacob had left of his beloved Rachel was the 2 sons she birthed for him, Joseph and Benjamin. And the symbol of his preferential parenting toward those 2 was the coat of many colors that Joseph wore. It was so obvious them 2 boys got more lap time, got more attention, got more hugs, got more conversation. The others were treated almost like the help and the hirelings, while those 2 was treated like little peacocks strutting around in fine clothes, while others were bare-chested and melting in the heat of the Palestinian sun. And that jealousy drove those brothers into the kind of homicidal mania that Cain had toward Abel. You see, you can set your children against one another when you practice preferential parenting. They said, oh, hear this dreamer coming. Let's slay him, cast him into some pit. We shall see what shall become of his dreams. While Jacob did nothing, he set his sons at odds with him. The Bible is filled with narratives of second sons, younger brothers leapfrogging over older brothers, children competing for parents' focus and resources. And so often the fathers don't handle their business. Something about fatherhood, it's well motherhood, but it's Father's Day. Something about fatherhood, somehow or another you can find yourself in the middle of some seething tensions among children. Sometimes it's the children from the previous marriage, tension with the children from this marriage, or the children you had before you got married, or the children you had outside the marriage versus those inside the marriage. There's tensions between the baby mama and the wife. Somehow or another, being fathers, it means that sometimes you stand in the midst of some real tensions you don't quite know what to do with. Brother, say amen under your breath. And the question is, how do you handle your business in the midst of these tensions for your time, your talents, and your little bit of treasure? Well, ironically, the most familiar and popular sibling rivalry was one that was among 2 fictional characters that we find in the New Testament. When Jesus is telling a story about a certain man that had 2 sons. The text opens with Jesus has told a story about a good shepherd. He's told a story about an old woman. And now he tells the third and final similitudes. There's more than one parable told at the same time, because the Lord is biting off a truth that's too big to be captured fully with one metaphor. So he strings a series of stories together so that collectively you get the point. And so in the third of three parables, it's about a certain man with two sons. Now, some people start off wrong and end up wrong, because if you start wrong, you're going to end up wrong. I heard a professor once say, your conclusions are only as sound as your assumptions and your presuppositions. If you start off with the wrong presumptions and suppositions, you're going to end up with the wrong conclusions. People conclude that this is a story about a prodigal son. How many of you have heard this story referred to as a story about the prodigal son? Well, you're going to end up in the wrong place if you think this is a story about a prodigal son. It says, Jesus said there was a certain man. Somebody say certain man. This story is not about a prodigal son. It's about a certain man who has two sons, a younger son and an older brother and a younger son. Whatever order you want to put them in, this is a story about a certain man. And you're not supposed to focus on the younger brother or the older brother. Glance at them, but keep your eyes fixed on the certain man. Because the point he's trying to make is only caught when you follow the certain man. The certain man is the protagonist. He's the main character of the story, because Jesus wants the earthly fathers to observe how the heavenly Father handles his business. A certain man has two sons. He's a man of wealth. He's a man of abundance. He's a man of prominence. He's a man of respect. He's a man of dignity. And the younger brother comes to him one day in a not so unusual fashion, and he says, Father, give me my share of the estate, of the inheritance. The older brother was entitled to a double portion of what any other son gets, which means his younger brother is only entitled to a third of the estate, but he wants that third. And he says, Father, give me my share. Now, you know this boy's already in trouble, Greg, because he's referring to the father's money as if it's his own. That's like your grown kids living in your house referring to where they sleep as their room. Unless you can show me papers, it's my room. Give me the portion that belongs to me. Usually they make that request with the lawyers after they do the ashes to ashes and the dust to dust. This boy's not only presumptuous, he's greedy and don't even want to wait till daddy gone. He wants daddy's money while daddy's still using it. Give me mine and inheritance. And his father capitulates to him. And he gives him his share of the estate. When you got so much that it don't really matter, gives it to him anyway. And the boy takes it and soon thereafter collects up his stuff that his daddy paid for, no less. Everything he got in his closet, in his drawer, his daddy has the receipt to. But he collects up all the stuff that his daddy bought from head to toe, to his socks and his drawers, and he takes off and goes to a far country to get as far away from his father as he can. And second clue, Rhonda, this boy is headed for trouble. Whenever you want the father's stuff but don't want the father's fellowship, you about to waste the stuff that you got from the father. Because you can't rightly use the Father's blessings outside of the fellowship of the Father. And you take God's blessings, but you run as far from God as you can get. Whatever God blessed you with, you about to waste it. This is a train wreck waiting to happen. The train is speeding and the bridge is out, and this is not about to go good. Soon enough, the economic weather turns bad. We ain't talking about no barometric pressure. We talking about stock markets and public policy, and the whole country was in famine. And this boy, his money quickly ran out. See, he didn't know you can make it or receive it quicker than you can spend it. Or you can spend it quicker than you can make it. He had all kind of friends, Phyllis, as long as he had a pocket full of money. He thought he had friends, so-called friends. Brothers and sisters, my millennial brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. It takes more than the click of a mouse to make a friend. Ain't nobody got 1,322 friends. When you got a pocket full of money, the people who will help you spend it are not your friends. Greg, you don't know who your friends are till you are broke, busted, and disgusted. And then you see who still come by to see about you. When you have nothing to offer them, no trinkets, no shiny objects, no gadgets and no gold. Who comes by to see you then? It goes bad. With a pocket full of money, he had friends helping him spend it. But when his money ran out, the crowd thinned out. And now all of a sudden, with his money gone and far away from his father, he's on his own. And now he's just struggling to survive. Jesus paints a shameful picture of what this boy has to do to survive in a far country where he has no favor, where his father's resources don't reach, and don't nobody want to give him nothing. Jesus paints the most shameful picture you can for a Jewish boy of the first century. It says that he hired himself out. A free man signs up for slavery, hires himself out to a man of that country, and then the man gives him the job of feeding pigs, swine. And here he is throwing slop to hogs, and he's so hungry that he suddenly wants, and is frothing at the mouth, licking his lips, wanting to eat the husks of the slop that the pigs themselves leave over. Now, humans are carnivores. That means we eat meat. Those of you who are vegan, you just in culinary exile. Come home. Come on home one day. I got a steak for you when you get here. We're carnivores, but pigs are omnivores. Omni meaning everything. They eat anything you throw at them, including food that has become mixed in the mud with their own feces and urine. And when you eat the pig, you are eating what they ate. They are the nastiest creature that God ever made. They would eat their own feces and urine. This boy is so desperate. His stomach has so shrunk in. He's so hungry that now things that on a full stomach he would have defined as nasty and disgusting is now looking delicious. You in a bad state when stuff that in your right mind you would call nasty is now looking delicious. And he wants for the husk that the pigs themselves have left over. And then it comes to himself. James says he came to himself and said, this don't make no sense. That here I am, got disgusting stuff looking delicious, because that's how long it's been since I had a good meal, and there's servants who in my father's house who are taking home doggy bags. Servants in my father's house, living in my father's overflow, and here I am so hungry that nasty stuff, disgusting stuff, unspeakable stuff is looking delicious to me. He had a wake-up call. Ain't nothing like a few lessons learned from the school of hard knocks. Hard-headed young men, and somehow or another being a young man includes chapters of being hard-headed. God ain't made no man who ain't had no hard head chapters. All the ladies in the house say amen. Something about the DNA of a man at some point in life or points in life, we start smelling ourselves. You taught us, but we don't want to hear it. You showed us, but we ain't trying to look at it. And we want to go out and push the boundaries and test the waters. And we start feeling we big enough and bad enough to pull it off. Have I got a witness? But ain't nothing like a few days, a few classes in the school of hard knocks to make deaf ears start to listen again and blind eyes to see what you was talking about. And a memory of some things that you're told. His life suddenly started making no sense to him. Have you ever had a time in your life where suddenly you realize that you not making no sense? Come on, somebody. It says he came to himself and said that I will go home to my father's house. Now he realizes all that he's done, how he's fallen short, how he has squandered his living, besmirched the family name, made a fool out of himself. His schemes blew up in his face. His karma has been bad for him. What he sent around has come around. It hasn't landed good for him. His life is a train wreck. So when he goes home, he does not know how his father's going to receive him. He knows how he deserves to be received and assumes he's going to get what he deserves. So he starts rehearsing his excuse when he gets to his father. Father, I am not worthy to be called your son. Make me a hired hand. After everything I've done wrong, I wouldn't assume you're going to bring me back in the big house. I will be content with the servant's quarters. It's better than the pigsty I have been in. Oh, but to his surprise, while he is still working out his soliloquy that he's going to give to his father sees him while he's still afar off. And amazingly, his father shrinks the distance between him and his son. And when he sees him headed in the right direction, he runs to meet him and he kisses him, throws his arms on him, begins to cry. Tells his servants, bring him a robe, put him on him, cover up the shame of where he has been. Put a ring on his finger, the family signet, this is my son. Kill a fatted calf because we're about to party and we're going to party all through the night. Come on, somebody, because my son, which was dead, is alive again. He was lost and now found. I like what Fred Craddock says. He says, in this instance, in this meeting on some back road, as the boy was on his way home, we see an encounter between utter shame and sheer grace. Oh, come on, somebody. He said this is utter shame and sheer grace. The boy comes home ashamed of all that he has done, feeling unworthy to even be called this man's son. But the father, in a culture where it is deemed beneath the dignity of a nobleman to run in public. Noblemen do not run in public. It was beneath them. If you see me running in public, you better run with me too, because something real bad is going on. It ain't a dignity thing. It's an age thing. If I'm running in public, somebody's probably shooting back there or something. There's a fire or something. You don't run in public. But here is a father. He's not concerned about his dignity and how he looks. The only thing he's concerned about is his son, which was lost, is now found. His son, which was dead, is now alive again. And if you remember nothing else about this sermon, remember this. The father has 2 points he wants to make with these 2 sons. And to this youngest son, his point to him when he is caught up in the utter shame of everything he's done, his point to him is that there's nothing you have done, are doing, or could ever do that will make me stop loving you. That's sheer grace. There is nothing you have done or could ever do that will make me stop loving you. Listen, love is not a reward that you extend to your children when they make you proud, but love is something they need to be able to rely on when they have blown it, when they have fallen short, when they have missed the mark. Love is something they need to be able to count on. Sheer grace, the unconditional love, when they have had to drop out of college because they got pregnant, when they got arrested, when they got hooked on drugs, when you raised them right and they still went wrong. Love is not a reward for good behavior, but love is something I can rely on when I have done my worst. I don't know if this boy's name was Ralph, Jamal, Barry, or what have you, but the father refers to him as one thing. He says, my son. My son. There's a story about a father and a mother. They were headed down to the precinct. The boy got arrested, came from a good family, put money away for him to go to college, all that. This boy went out with his friends, acted a fool. Things got out of hand. He got arrested, and the father was angry, talking about, I'm going to straighten him out, yada, yada. And the mother quietly says to him, she says, baby, whatever you say to him, start off by just tell the boy you love him. I love him. No, he didn't wasted all this money. I just said, tell the boy that you love him. And tell the boy that I love him. What that got to do with anything? She says, you talking about everything he did. Trust me, he know. He know. If you just gonna tell him what he got arrested for, he know. The question is, you need to tell something he don't know, and that's whether or not you still love him. Huh? When I was playing at the University of Puget Sound, we had a game against Portland State, and all we had to do was run out the clock, Terry. And the coach told me as we went out on the field, and he says, listen, we're going to give you the ball, and just don't fumble the ball. You don't need to break free. You don't need no touchdown. We just need to hold on to the ball, run out the clock. And as I ran out on the court, he grabbed my face mask. He said, just don't fumble the ball. Hold on to the ball. I said, I got it. We ran out onto the field. And then suddenly when the play happened, and I think it was the quarterback's fault. He didn't put it where I can grab it. All I know is the ball hit the ground and somebody wearing the other team's uniform fell on it. They grabbed the ball and they kicked the winning field goal, and we lost. We lost. But before they kicked that field goal, when I fumbled the ball and was headed toward the sideline with my head hanging low and everybody looking at me crazy, one of the coaches came and yelled at me. He said, you fumbled the ball. And I'm thinking to myself, like I don't know that. I knew I fumbled the ball. Nobody knew better than me. The question I did not know is whether or not I should come back to practice next week. The question I didn't know is I still got a place on this team. What I didn't know is if I was still going to be in the starting lineup. What would have meant more to me is if the coach would have put his arm around my shoulder and said, everybody make mistakes. And see, we as fathers, sometimes we miss that because we're so transactional. We are doers. When people talk about their mothers, they tell you how their mothers are. When they talk about their fathers, they tell you what their fathers do. So we're always worried about transaction and what you're doing. And we get caught up in what our kids are doing. And when they're doing well, we got our arm around their shoulders talking about my boy or my daughter and my boy. But the question is, when they have the stench of the pig slop on them, and when they got the stains of the feces and the urine on them, and when they got the shame of that arrest record, and when they have the indignity of the addiction that has taken them over, the question is, what do you call them then? I know how you introduce them when they cross the stage and turn the tassel or make all city. The question is, how do you introduce them to your friends when they haven't had a job so long you don't remember the last time they got a pay step? Do you say then, this is my son, addict and all, this is my daughter, though she got a baby daddy, no marriage certificate, no, this is my daughter. When they're in utter shame, do they experience any sheer grace? They They know they got arrested. They know they're addicted. They know they lost the job. They know they should have made better decisions. But do they know that you love them at their worst? How do you handle your business in their worst moment? I come to tell you, this certain man, the way he handled his business, Ida, is that when his son was in utter shame, the father extended to him sheer grace. Sometimes we say, yeah, I love my son, but I come to tell you, when you say but, whatever you say after that but cancels out whatever you said before the but. I love him, but he needs a job. I love him, but he shouldn't have made all these babies. I love him, but he should have made different decisions. Listen, he can't feel your love for the sake of the but you keep putting in his face. Get your butt out his face and put your love in his face. Come on, somebody. Look at your neighbor. Look at a man next to you and say, keep your butt out your children's face. They need your love, not your butt. But this man had two sons. This man had two sons. Now see, that younger brother represented the Gentile world coming into the church. And from the Jewish perspective, the Gentile world was out of control. All of their idolatry and their idolatry cults and their reckless living, their sexual mores and the stuff they ate and the way they lived seemed to be wild stuff from a whole nother world. And that's why Jesus presents this younger son as the Gentile world coming into the church, coming in with their disgusting ways. And how does the Heavenly Father receive these newfangled folks coming into the body of Christ that seems so disgusting to those of us who've been in church all our lives? They are my children. They are my children. But now as the celebration begins, the older brother, he's out in the field working like he does every day. He's reliable. He's traditional. He's an institutionalist, born and bred in the church. He's out in the field working like he does every day. And he hears the noise, the sounds of music and celebration. He draws near the house. Asks one of the servants. He said, what's going on? He gets Marvin Gaye-ish. What's going on? He said, your brother has come home and your father's throwing a celebration. And Jerome, he gets angry. And you can always tell, now this boy is headed for trouble. Why? Because he clearly has his father's DNA. If you look and see at the same firm set of the jawline, same features, same body frame. But while he looks like his father on the outside, clearly he doesn't have his father's heart. Because the very thing that his father is celebrating, he is now lamenting. Be careful when you find yourself upset about the stuff that God is celebrating. It's one thing to have access to your father's stuff, but you don't have your father's heart. The youngest boy wanted his stuff, but didn't want his fellowship. And the older boy stayed in the house. He's wearing his father's stuff, but he clearly don't have his father's heart because he's lamenting the very thing that the father's celebrating. And so the father comes out when he learns that the older boy is not happy about the younger boy coming home. And then when the father comes out, before the father could even begin to entreat his son, the young older brother begins to blurt out, I've been with you all this time. You ain't never had to come down to no precinct and bail me out. You ain't never had to come up to the school to see about me. You ain't never had to put no bail bonds out on me. I ain't got no paternity suits. There ain't never been no bad pub on me. And yet you ain't never killed no fatted calf and so that I can invite my friends over for no celebration. Look, with this boy's attitude, he probably ain't got no friends. And while he was out there stirring out at the club, making it rain, hanging out with pole climbers and prostitutes for all that bad behavior, he gets a whole lot of attention. And it says that the father says to him, listen. It says he pleads with him. Listen, all that I have is thine. From head to toe, everything you got on, I paid for. You living in my house. You stand to gain my inheritance. From your DNA down to your socks and drawers, everything you got is from me. You've been living in opulence every day. How can you act as if when you're geared up in designer label clothes, how can you behave as if you are somehow or another being mistreated? And here's the second thing about this sermon I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else. To that older brother, the message from the father is simple. The blessings I give to your brother, the love and resources I extend to your brother are not coming at your expense. There's something on the hard drive of our sinful human nature that makes us think that if somebody else is getting attention and investment, it's coming at my expense. Now, we see that in our natural families. Though anybody in here got more than one child, you know that when you got ready to have that second child, you were intentional about, I hope you were intentional about making sure that that first child knew that we got enough love for that second child without having to divest any love from we have in you. How many of you know that you make a point? There was a story about a family where the mother was getting ready to birth the second child, and they didn't want the first child to feel excluded or now less than important or marginalized in the family system. So what they did was they brought the boy into the delivery right as the new baby was born. Now, they strategically positioned him so he didn't see the wrong thing and be traumatized. So he stayed above the sheet. Y'all know what I'm talking about? You don't want to go beneath the sheet. You might not ever get over that. They kept him above the sheet, and as the baby burst forth, he saw the baby pulled from beneath the sheet, and the doctor hold him up, as they said, smack him on his bottom, take a deep breath, and begin to holler. And then they cleaned him up, wrapped him up, gave him to the mama. They brought the little boy into the room with mom and daddy holding the new baby, and they said, son, to the older baby, they said, what you think about your little brother? And the little boy said, well, I'm glad the doctor spanked him. And they said, why? He says, because he shouldn't have crawled up in there in the first place. There's something about us that make us think if somebody else is getting blessed, it comes at our expense. We not only see it in the natural family, we see it in the church family. Or we sit up there and say we want our church to grow. We want to reach out into the community. No sooner do we reach out and lift him up, and he begins to draw, and people come in, and then all of a sudden the same people who did the reaching out start getting resentful of the people who come in as the result of your own reaching. Sometimes we act like the fishermen who resent the fish that took the bait that you put out there in the first place. Imagine baiting the hook, the fish bite the bait, and then you throw back the fish because you're wondering if there's enough room in the boat for you and the fish. Sometimes churches are like that. Who these Johnny-come-latelys? We've been here all the time. We bought this. We took this abandoned facility, turned it into a modern 21st century facility. We paid for them chairs. We bought that sound system. You better sit down somewhere, and you better not sit in my seat. I don't care if I come here an hour late. My seat, I wish you would sit in my seat. That's my seat. My friend Troy Bronner was the pastor of the great historic Calvary Baptist Church, Buffalo, New York, formerly pastored by L.T. Boyce, pastor 35 years. He died and went home to the Lord. And Troy Bronner, fabulous preacher, was called to succeed him. The church was growing by leaps and bounds. And the more the church grew, the more those longtime members started to get nervous. And they went to him in mass and they told him, we don't care how many folk you bring in here or how much money goes in that plate, this is still our church. I come to tell you, ain't nobody but Jesus got a church. This ain't Braxton's church. This ain't Sarah's church. It ain't Eugene's church. It ain't Lydia's church. It ain't the deacon's church. It ain't the board of directors' church. We got one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God who is in all, through all. And then while I'm at it, said, this ain't no black church. It ain't no white church. It ain't no straight church. It ain't no educated church. This is a church of Jesus Christ. Whatever the numbers are, this church was bought and paid for, not by your tithes and offering, but by the blood of Jesus Christ when he paid it all, and all to him we owe. I wish I had 3-4 witnesses in here. And that older brother need to understand that all that we have is the Lord's. We too blessed to be acting like the God we serve can't bless our brother and bless us as well. Our nation needs to hear that, because we have an older brother politics going on in this nation. Haven't you seen it? When a nation of immigrants becomes anti-immigrant, that ain't nothing but older brother politics. Have I got a witness? Can you imagine if the current occupant in the White House was the man in this story when the younger brother comes home and goes out into the field to talk to the older brother? Can you imagine what 45 would have said to the older brother? He'd have said that your younger brother done come, and your younger brother, he's bringing drugs, he's bringing crime, he's bringing prostitutes. He'd went out and stirred up that older brother so bad, he'd have went in and shot that younger brother. Have I got a witness? But if this certain man in the parable who handles his business, I believe if he was in the White House, he'd be trying to tell the older brothers in this country, those who fear they're being overrun, those who want to make America great again, those who feel that they're the real Americans, those who feel they want to take their country back, he would be telling them, listen, there's plenty good room for all of God's children. Have I got a witness? Red and yellow, black and white, they are all precious in God's sight, and you can't build enough walls to keep your younger brother out, because you build a wall, they'll dig a tunnel. Have I got a witness? Because what God has for me, he has for me. You can't stop me, you can't block me, because God can do more for me than the older brother can do against me. Have I got a witness? Oh, so I just stopped by to tell you, look how this certain man handles his business to the younger brother. He says in his utter shame, there's nothing you can do to make me stop loving you. And to that older brother, he wants them to know that the heart of a real father is ever enlarging, that I can love your brother and not take anything from you. And I got more blessings than you got aspiration, greed, because I'm able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond what you can ask or ever even imagine. I can throw a banquet for your brother and turn around and give a banquet to you too. I got a room for your brother and I got a room for you too. I got a mansion for your brother and I got a mansion for you too. I got blessings for your brother and I got blessings for you too. I can open up the windows of heaven for you, and I can open up the windows of heaven for your brother and not even scratch the surface of what I got, because I own the cattle on 1,000 hill, and the hill that the cattle are on. Have I got a witness? And when that older brother says, your son which has come home, the father pushes it back and said, no, your brother, because while he is my son and you are my son, it's not just about my relationship with my sons. I'm also concerned about the relationships among the brothers. That is your brother. Have I got a witness? And that's all that the Lord is trying to say. He wants the brother to see his brother, not an undocumented person, but to see your brother, not a sexual minority, but to see your sister, not an opponent in the next election, but to see your neighbor. Have I got a witness? He wants you to see your brother. There's one pole on the cross that reaches up that connects us to God, but there's a crossbar that reaches out that connects us to each other. How can you say you love God whom you've never seen and not reach out to your brother that you see every day? You better come on in and join this party. My son, which was addicted, is now in rehab. You better join this party. My daughter, who was on the pole, is now standing on the promises. You better come in here and join this party. My child, which was strung out on them drugs, is now well with her soul. You better come on in here and join this party. Have I got a witness? Because my grace is still sufficient and my strength is made perfect in weakness. So I just come to ask the men today, how are you handling your business? Look at how the story ends. It ends, we don't know if the older brother comes in, but it doesn't matter. He's not the main character. We know that when the story ends, it says the father's pleading with him. So the story ends with a frozen frame with the father like this. Because in reality, we as parents, as mothers and fathers, but since his father's there as fathers, we don't know who's going to take advantage of what we're trying to do for them. We don't know who's going to take advantage of the sacrifices we've made for them. We don't know who's going to turn their life around. We don't know who's going to receive our invitation. We don't know who's going to respond to our pouring ourselves out like a basin toward them. But that's not the point. You can't control that. What you can control is, regardless of what condition they're in, are you still there pleading? Do you ever stop pleading? Do you ever stop reaching? Do you ever stop loving? Do you ever stop making yourself available? Do you ever stop reminding them that you still love them no matter what? The rest will take care of itself. If your story were frozen right now, is this the picture they'll see forever? You knew better? I raised you better? Is this the frame they see you standing back popping your suspended? No, this is my house. What's the picture they see? Is it your back as they see you walking away because you don't want nothing to do with this foolishness? How are you handling your business? If the story of your life was frozen right now in the midst of the family, what's the posture that they see you in? Is it this? Y'all sing something. I'm just glad that when I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more, but the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Wherever you freeze the frame in my life, God is always standing there like this, ready to start over. This Father's Day, what's your posture? When your children have the stench and the stank of what pigs don't even want on them, when what they've gotten into is absolutely disgusting, how do you respond to them then? Do you run and hug them while they still have the filth and the soot of the mess on them? You hug them anyway to get the stains on your expensive suit because you don't care nothing about the suit. You can throw the suit away, but you ain't gonna throw your son away or your daughter away. Utter shame meets sheer grace. And a resentful older brother learns that I can bless your brother and I ain't begrudging you nothing. What message are you sending? Doors of the church are open. If there's somebody here today who needs a relationship with the Heavenly Father, I invite you to come.
To the table of the Lord. You're invited to the table of the Lord.
There's somebody today who has never